Ever think about what happens after an architect designs a fancy new building? Like, do they ever actually check to see if the thing works? Well, today we're diving into that exact question. We've got some really interesting stuff to look at, stuff that reveals how architects actually figure out if their creations are a success or not, once people are actually living and working in them.
Yeah, it's kind of a hidden part of the process, right? Like we see the finished building and it feels like, okay, they're done. But really, that's just the start of a whole other phase, a phase where they learn from what worked and maybe what didn't quite hit the mark. And it's not about pointing fingers. It's about making sure the next building is even better.
It's like closing the loop. We're going to explore all the angles they consider, everything from, like, does the building actually do what it was supposed to whether the people inside are happy, how it affects the environment, and obviously how it looks and how well it's put together from a technical perspective. We want to get beyond just, like, thumbs up or thumbs down and really understand how the original vision translates into reality. So let's start by figuring out why this whole evaluation thing is so important in the first place.
Well, for starters, it's about accountability. Did the finished building actually meet the needs laid out in the original plan? Did they stay on budget? Did they follow all the rules and regulations? It's like architecture's big fact check. Did you actually do what you said you would do?
Right, that makes sense. But it goes deeper than that too, right? It's about how the building actually performs. Is it a good place for people to spend their time? What about its impact on the environment? Does it meet those goals?
Absolutely. And this is where things get really interesting. Architects can uncover some super valuable lessons by looking back on a finished project, like what worked well, what could have been better. These takeaways become incredibly useful for future projects. It helps individual architects get better at their craft, but it also shapes how the whole profession evolves.
It also brings the focus back to the people actually using these buildings, the end users. Our sources are clear. User-centered design is key. Evaluation makes sure the needs and experiences of the folks living and working in these buildings were addressed in the design. It's not just about creating a pretty picture. It's about crafting spaces that actually work for the people who use them day in and day out.
And let's not forget sustainability. Evaluation is a chance to see how a building is performing environmentally, its energy use, resource management, and to see if it hits those initial environmental targets.
Totally. Then there's a building's larger role, like its aesthetic and cultural impact. Does it contribute positively to the surrounding public space? Does it fit in with or even enhance the local character? These are all essential considerations. It's cool how different methods, formal ones like post-occupancy evaluations, and more informal approaches like design critiques and personal reflection all feed into this goal of closing the loop, so to speak. So we get why evaluation is important, but how about the how? Our sources talk about frameworks for structuring this.
These frameworks help look at a design from different angles more systematically. You get a more complete picture, not just a bunch of random opinions.
Like putting on different pairs of glasses. So let's try these on. First up, functional performance. What does that even mean?
It's all about whether the building actually supports what it's supposed to do. Are spaces the right size for their purpose? Do they flow together well? Can people move through the building easily? A building can be stunning, but if it doesn't function well, it's kind of failed, right? So the main question is, does the building work? Makes sense. Then we've got technical performance. That sounds more like, the nuts and bolts of how it's built and if it's holding up over time.
Exactly. This is all about safety and integrity. Is the structure sound and stable? Does it meet those building codes, those safety rules that are like super important? Are materials aging well? Are the essential building systems, things like HVAC, lighting, plumbing, working the way they should? It's basically asking, is it built well and is it safe?
Essential stuff. Next, environmental performance, which feels increasingly crucial in today's world.
Definitely. This is all about how the building interacts with the natural world. How much energy does it actually use compared to the initial predictions? How effective are those passive design features? They included things like daylighting or natural ventilation. And how well does the building manage water resources? So the big question is, how does it treat the environment?
Then we have economic performance, which isn't the first thing that comes to mind, but obviously it matters.
For sure. This looks at the financial side, both the initial construction and ongoing operations. Did they stick to the budget? Is it cost-effective to maintain? And did it have a positive impact on the local economy, maybe through things like urban renewal or attracting new businesses? The question here is it economically sound in the long run?
Okay, now we get to something people might immediately associate with architecture: aesthetic and spatial quality.
This is where we consider the look and feel. Is it visually pleasing? Does it create interesting experiences for the people inside? How effectively does it use light, materials, proportions to create a specific atmosphere? Think about those places that just make you feel a certain way when you walk in. So we're asking, is it a pleasant and engaging place to be?
And finally, social and cultural impact, which seems to zoom out beyond just the building itself.
It does. This dimension considers how the building fits into the broader community and culture. Does it serve the needs of the community well? Is it inclusive and accessible to everyone? Does it reflect or reinforce the local identity? We're asking, how does it affect the community and culture around it? And what's really neat here is that effective evaluation isn't just about numbers and hard data. It's a blend of that objective stuff and more subjective, interpretive insights. So to recap, when evaluating a building, we're asking, does it work? Is it built well? Is it environmentally responsible? Is it financially sound? Is it a pleasant place to be? And does it serve its community?
Okay, so those are the frameworks.
Yeah.
But how do architects actually do the evaluation? What are the methods they use?
Well, one of the most formal and in-depth is the post-occupancy evaluation, or POE for short.
Right, we touched on that earlier. Can you break that down a bit? What actually happens in a POE?
Think of it like a building's checkup after it's been living in the real world for a while. A POE happens after a building has been occupied for a period of time, usually 6 months to 2 years, and it involves gathering lots of data and feedback from the people who use it every day. The occupants, the facility managers, even the maintenance staff. They use surveys, interviews, and sometimes even observational studies to see how people actually move through and use the spaces. They'll also monitor things like energy use, temperature, air quality, acoustics. Then they compare all this data to the original design goals to see how the building measures up in real-world conditions.
Sounds comprehensive.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of such a detailed process?
Oh, the benefits are huge. A POE can pinpoint what's working well and what needs improvement. This informs future design decisions, even shaping a firm's overall practices. Sometimes it can even lead to adjustments to the building systems or minor renovations to make it work better and keep everyone happy.
So that's the very formal, data-driven side of things. But what about the more, let's say, interpretive aspect, the critique part of evaluation?
That's where design reviews and critiques come in. While POEs are more common once a building is finished and occupied, critiques happen all the time in architecture school and also in professional settings during different stages of a project. It's really about promoting dialogue, asking good questions, and understanding the design process more deeply. It involves presenting the design, whether it's a student project or a real building, to a group of peers, mentors, clients, or even future users who offer their perspectives and feedback. This evaluation looks at the ideas behind the design, how it was developed, its final form, and how well it communicates its message.
Our sources mention that critiques happen at different points in the design process, too.
Exactly. There are formative critiques, which happen during the design process itself. These provide feedback that can actually influence how the design evolves. And then there are summative critiques, which happen after completion, to provide a final assessment. Both are super important for developing critical thinking skills, learning to be open to feedback, and becoming a more creative designer. Think of it like getting feedback on a draft of an essay versus getting your final grade. Both are valuable.
That makes total sense. Now, there's also user experience assessment, or UX. We hear that a lot in the tech world. How does it apply to architecture?
The basic idea is the same. UX in architecture is all about how people feel and behave in a space. It goes beyond, like, does this room work, to consider the emotional and psychological impact on the people using it. It's a whole other level. They use walkthroughs, guided tours, even ask users to keep diaries to record their experiences. Sometimes they use behavioral mapping to, like, visually track how people move around. It's super useful in places like schools, hospitals, or public spaces where the emotional well-being of the people inside really matters.
It's like considering the emotional landscape of a building, which is something I hadn't really thought about before. Pretty cool. And then there's all this new technology being used for building performance simulation and data logging, even after construction is finished.
Oh yeah, smart buildings are changing the game. They use sensors to constantly monitor things like how many people are using a space, energy consumption, temperature fluctuations, light levels, even how sound travels. All this data gets compared to what the designers initially predicted using fancy software. This helps identify any gaps between what they thought would happen and what's actually happening. And that means they can fine-tune things and optimize the building for efficiency and comfort.
So we've talked about measuring performance and understanding user experience. But how do architects actually critique aesthetics, that subjective sense of good design?
That's a great point. Aesthetics is definitely more subjective than, say, measuring energy use. But architects do use established criteria when evaluating a design. They look at the composition, the proportions, the materials used, the detailing, how light and shadow play in the space, how spaces flow together, and ultimately how innovative and coherent the whole concept is. And then there are public platforms like design awards, journals, exhibitions. Those all play a role in shaping aesthetic critique within the profession. And architectural theory provides a deeper cultural context for those conversations. It's not just random opinions being thrown around.
Our sources talk about the importance of studio critiques in architectural education. What exactly goes down in a crit?
The crit is a core part of how architects are trained. It's a structured feedback session where students present their work drawings, models, ideas to their classmates and instructors, who then offer critiques. It teaches students to explain their design choices and defend their decisions. It helps them develop the language they need to talk about design effectively. And it creates this environment of iterative learning where feedback is a tool for improvement, not just a judgment.
I've heard that crits can be pretty intense sometimes.
They can be, but the format varies. It can be an informal conversation around a desk or a more formal presentation, sometimes called a pinup or review board, where the work is displayed publicly. The goal, though, is to build a culture of constructive criticism where feedback is seen as essential for growth.
Makes sense. So do we have any real-world examples of how this all plays out with actual famous buildings?
We sure do. Our sources offer some really cool case studies. One is the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco. Their goal was to create a super sustainable museum, and evaluations have shown that they nailed it. It achieved LEED Platinum certification, and that iconic living roof is amazing. People rave about the natural light and how the exhibits connect with the surrounding environment. But some initial critiques pointed out that it was hard to find your way around, so they made some design tweaks to improve navigation. So even when a building is praised for its sustainability, they still have to consider the user experience.
Right. It shows that feedback is always valuable no matter how successful a project seems. What about the Gherkin in London? That building's so recognizable.
Oh yeah, the Gherkin is a classic example of iconic architecture. The designers, Foster Plus partners, wanted to create a landmark and a super energy efficient tower. And those evaluations showed that the double skin facade really does reduce the need for heating and cooling. Plus, people love its unique shape. But some tenants have complained about the curved floor plan, making things a bit awkward to use, and some studies have questioned whether its actual energy performance matches those initial predictions. It's a good reminder to always look beyond the hype and see how things are really performing.
Fascinating. And then there's BED, the Beddington Zero Energy Development in the UK. That was a pioneering project for carbon neutral housing. What did they learn from that?
BED was a huge step forward in sustainable housing. They use passive solar design, community-scale energy, and water systems, really innovative stuff. But when they evaluated it, they found some issues. Some units overheated in summer, residents weren't properly trained on how to use the energy-saving systems, and energy savings weren't consistent across the development. These findings led to changes and improvements in later phases of the project. It shows that sustainable design is an ongoing process, always learning and evolving. And those case studies make it clear that even famous, award-winning buildings can benefit from a close look after they're built. It's not about criticizing for the sake of criticizing, it's about transparency, learning, and making the whole field better.
Those real-world examples are really illuminating. But it can't all be smooth sailing, right? What are some of the challenges that come with evaluating and critiquing design?
Oh, there are definitely hurdles. One of the biggest is subjectivity, especially when it comes to aesthetics and user experience. What one person finds beautiful or comfortable, another might hate. Cultural backgrounds and personal preferences play a big role. Another challenge is resources. Some firms, especially smaller ones, might not have the time or money for formal evaluations like POEs. And sometimes, clients might be resistant to the idea. They might worry about the cost or be afraid of what the evaluation might uncover.
It's understandable, right? Nobody wants to dwell on the negatives.
Totally. And this can lead to another challenge: incomplete feedback loops. If a firm doesn't have a system for capturing those lessons learned and applying them to future projects, they might keep making the same mistakes. If they don't investigate why the real-world performance doesn't match the simulations, they're missing opportunities for improvement. And then there's the human element. Some architects might be defensive about critique, taking it personally instead of seeing it as a chance to grow. And in school, if the studio culture is too harsh or judgmental, it can shut down open dialogue and hinder learning.
Those are all really important things to consider. So how can the field move toward a better, more reflective practice where evaluation and critique are embraced?
Our sources offer some great ideas. First, a mindset shift is needed. Every project should be seen as a learning opportunity, like a prototype. Creating feedback-rich environments that involve clients, users, and the whole design team is also crucial. This means fostering a culture of humility and curiosity, where asking questions and seeking feedback are seen as strengths, not weaknesses.
It's moving away from that architect is lone genius stereotype toward a more collaborative and learning-focused approach.
Exactly. And practically speaking, firms should have systems for documenting lessons learned and incorporating those insights into future projects. Working with experts from other fields, engineers, sociologists, the people who actually use the building can also provide a more holistic understanding. Ultimately, we should see buildings not as static, finished products, but as ongoing contributions to a larger conversation about architecture, where evaluation and critique are key to driving progress and innovation. This has been a fascinating look at something that often goes unnoticed, but is clearly so crucial. It's obvious now that evaluating and critiquing design isn't just about passing judgment. It's an ongoing process that's absolutely essential for creating buildings that are more meaningful, more ethical, more responsible, and ultimately more impactful.
Couldn't agree more. It's the bridge between what the designer sets out to do and what the building actually becomes, taking into account everything from energy use and accessibility to how happy people are in the space. It's about long-term value.
So the next time you're walking around, think about all the buildings you see. And remember that each one has probably gone through this process of design, evaluation, refinement, this constant striving to create spaces that truly serve and inspire the people who use them.